If you've never gone live from YouTube, you may not realize that it can take a few seconds anyway until you're notified that you are live, and it certainly takes longer to actually end the stream. I'm showing you this because it is of my cat, and it reminds me of my cats. I have 5 cats that I haven't seen in a year, and by God, I'm going to get them back. There have been some issues regarding actually getting my own cats back from the person who claimed to be a foster, and I'm going to get them back. Why? Because I love big. One person years ago told me that my heart was bigger than the parking lot of the restaurant we were sitting in, and I said, actually, and I thought about it, I said, my heart is bigger than this world. He, he agreed. My heart goes out to my cats. Wherever you are, cats, I will find you and I will make you safe and I will bring you home to the world of love that you deserve. One of the things I'm talking about today is empathy. And I was inspired by a couple of brief YouTube videos that I put on my Facebook. 5059. You're welcome to look at that. All the posts I make on my Facebook profile are public, and if you want to follow me so that I believe you'll be notified when I put new stuff up. Empaths. What are we? We are those who feel the emotions of others. We are sensitive. Sometimes we're called sensitives. There may be structural differences between our brains and that of more typical people who are noted for their empathy. And one of the ways they figure that out is to do longitudinal studies where people's social characteristics are identified. And then once they've donated their bodies to science, their brains are studied. And lo and behold, people who were called deeply compassionate or highly empathic or very sensitive and kind and nurturing, and people who self-profess to, and so we may actually be sort of genetically inclined to be empathic instead of careless and thoughtless and heartless and narcissistic and unkind. We are the animal advocates of the world. We, growing up, that it was hard for my parents and sisters to take me for walks around the neighborhood because I wanted to take home all the cats and all the dogs. And I remember a day when my oldest sister took me aside and said, look, Nancy, if you really want me to take you for a walk, you got to realize that the cats and dogs we see in these yards are okay. But I said, but what about when they're not? What if they look like they're, stray or suffering or hungry or dirty? And she said, well, then we'll deal with it. We'll go knock on the door and we'll try to help that animal. But stop trying to take home every single dog and cat in the world because we can't. They're not ours, and you're not supposed to. And I had to, steel myself to wave at the doggy or the cat and not try to carry it home with me next to my heart. We are the child care advocates. We are the people who volunteer for the CASA program, court-appointed special advocates. We are the daycare workers. We become the elementary school teachers. We become the social workers, which is extremely difficult work. The recidivism rate in some social work jobs is about 2 years. I talked to a woman years ago who was involved in child advocacy on the on the government level, and she said most of her cohorts lasted about 2 years because what they saw and how deeply they cared just caused them to burn out and run. Human rights workers. I was writing for Amnesty International by the time I was 11 years old in 5th grade. I started writing letters to government leaders on behalf of political prisoners worldwide. We care about human rights. We're the Black Lives Matter, but we're also the All Lives Matter people. All lives matter. The other thing empaths tend to do is care deeply about the planet. We are, spiritually Lakota or Hopi or something. We may not be how the Great Spirit washes over and should be protecting this earth. We walk barefoot. We care about wildlife. We support things like the Sierra Club and World Wildlife movements. We care very, very deeply, not only about other people, but about members of other species. And we care very deeply about the world. Years ago, I had a dream, and I'll always remember because it was one of the most powerful and potent dreams of my entire life. On February the 28th, 2008, I had a dream. And during this dream, I was standing in my apartment with my cats all around, and um, I was standing doing some sort of ceremonial thing. I'm not sure what. And all of a sudden, a beam of white light, like this big, just shot straight out of the top of my head. Out of the crown chakra, I shot this huge beam of light. And in the few seconds this beam of light was coming out of the top of my head in this dream, I felt all the emotion in the world. Hey, talk about empathy. That's what the 36 most righteous, the concept that the Jewish have of the 36 most righteous ones, I believe is called Lamed Vav, feel. So all of a sudden I was Lamed Vav, I was feeling all the emotion in the entire world. And then I just passed out. In the dream, it was so much for me because almost so much of it was pain. I literally just passed out in the dream. And when I woke up into that same apartment with my cats all around, and no beams of light were shooting out of my head. And I just felt so exhausted and so informed by that experience. What I experienced in the dream, and I think that somehow it might be accurate, was that when you feel all the emotion in the world, you do find out that most of it's negative. Um, the emotion that I felt most prevalently on this planet was pain. From the human context, the pain was coming from children who were being raised by parents who were disrespectful and abusive, and even physically so, from elderly people in assisted care facilities where they were being ignored or abused or felt like they had no way of serving or helping others anymore. Prisoners especially prisoners who were unjustifiably imprisoned all over the world. And believe me, there's a lot of injustice in the world. And abused spouses, people in abusive marriages where they really felt imprisoned and they were afraid of their own family members. And often the pain that those people were in were not only trying to protect themselves and their own dignity, but trying to protect children and pets and other family members. Sometimes in an abusive relationship, not only the pets and children and the spouse are threatened, but other family members or friends are also threatened. So in all those contexts, there was a lot of pain. What I did see in the human people who had jobs and homes, and they were physically able and they seemed to have self-control. The self-control and the empowerment that being able to work and earn and have your own home and that sort of thing was very empowering. And they weren't necessarily happy people, but thanks for the thumbs up. But they were empowered by their ability to function and control their lives. So it was all these contexts that the pain from the human side was coming from all these contexts in which individuals were not in control of being abused or their own safety or that of others that they cared about. And interestingly enough, since I said I not only felt all the pain in the world, I felt all the emotion in the world, there was some contentment. In the Western world, that contentment or happiness or even elation was sort of fleeting, and it was often based, like I said, I very literally in the dream felt all the emotion in the world and who it was coming from. It was like my consciousness fragmented into 8 billion, actually more, because I felt all the pain in the animal world, and I'll get to that in a moment. Um, the the elation or the happiness tended to be fleeting, like some girl bought the right dress for the party, or some guy asked out the girl of his dreams to go to the prom and she said yes. Or, in the Western world, it was often based on things that were not particularly substantial or possibly even downright fleeting, like, oh, they bought this really cool car or something. These things are ephemeral, they come and go. Ironically, there were certain vast pockets of relative contentment in the world, and they weren't from Western countries at all, where things are very competitive and very acquisitive, and everybody wants more, 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 bigger stereo system, bigger TV, bigger car, better mansion, blah, blah, blah. The pockets of contentment that I felt in the world were coming from countries where the goals are not so acquisitive and the societal structures are not so competitive. Some guy working the fields with his oxen was content that he put in a good day's work and that his fields were growing and his plants were doing well. Some mother with 4 children that she was raising, maybe in what might look like poverty to us, but the kids were kind and sweet natured and helpful and service oriented, and they were clean and healthy. These were the sources of contentment. And I learned, I hope that this resonates with you. I hope that what I just said really makes you question the structure of your own desire for contentment. What really is going to make you happy? The bigger mansion, the bigger car, the right girl going to the prom with you, or the right dress for that event? No. What's really going to make you content is spiritual evolution, wisdom, right action, humility, right service, and doing some good in the world. And that's what I learned in a flash in this dream. Now, quickly, I'll get to the most of the pain. The vast majority of the pain that I felt in this dream experience when the laser beam shot out of my head and I felt like Lama Bob, one of the 36 righteous ones or whatever, was from the animal world. It was from members of other species, and almost all of it was caused by us. Almost all. I mean, the vast majority of pain in the world wasn't coming from the human species at all, and you think it might be, but it wasn't. It was coming from all the animals we tortured, all the animals in factory farms, living unnatural lives, all the animals in experimental laboratories in which horrifyingly cruel and unspeakable things are being done to them in the name of health. No, the human species will never, ever achieve health by torturing members of other species in order to figure out what made life life to begin with. We will not achieve our own health through torturing others. So consider going vegan because it is a significantly more clean spiritually. The pain in the world was coming from animals in zoos. The pain in the world was coming from animals in fur farms and at the dog and cat meat festivals. And in any context, any household, animals are used as whipping posts for ignorant, angry people who can't control themselves or do drugs or alcohol and take their emotional states out on helpless critters. Hear what I just said. If you take your anger and your frustrations out on your dog or cat or horse or parrot or ferret, find a better home for them because they don't deserve that. And that it's not their job to be your emotional service whipping post. You know, get a life that actually matters. But rehome your pets if you take your anger out on them. And so I really hope that that in itself also gives you greater insight because in that dream in which I felt all the emotion in the world, much more of it was pain than joy or contentment. And most of it was coming from members of other species, and most of that pain was created by man. So let's get to the 6 points about empathy. Um, Basically, it is a situation where we tend to be really sensitive to the emotional states of others, and if we're around happy people, we kind of catch that. And if we're around angry or sad people, we also catch that. So it becomes important to recognize an empath. If your son or daughter is empathic, it's important that you don't let them catch your emotional state. If you are a psychologist and you're dealing with an empath or a counselor of any sort or a teacher, it's important that you recognize that empaths are very sensitive, beautiful people, and they will nurture anything in their path, possibly sometimes to their detriment. Uh, One of the things about empaths is that we do tend to get sucked into abusive relationships because we're the fixers. We want to fix everyone. We think we've got the band-aids. We are accustomed, often from childhood on, to being the bridge to someone else's emotional health. Maybe our parents weren't necessarily great communicators or had their own problems or whatever. And empathic people were empathic children and may have a lifetime of trying to put emotional band-aids on everyone else. And at some point, we have to face the fact that it can be too big of a job and it's not even necessarily ours. The second point I'd like to make is that empaths can seem uh, isolated, and it's not. It's counterintuitive. It's actually not what you do. An empath, why, that's a person who's going to be the life of the party, or very nurturing, and or the queen bee, and feeding everyone at Thanksgiving and Christmas. Not necessarily. Most empaths are actually introverted people, not extroverted people. And yes, we may want to feed everybody at Thanksgiving and Christmas, but we tend to need a lot of alone time. We tend to need silence. We are sensitive to loud noises and background talk and televisions and loud music. We need silence. We need solitude because we feel everything that others are feeling, and sometimes that just gets to be too much, so we have to withdraw. Another point I would like to make is uh, that that same withdrawal can seem like arrogance or coldness. And here again, that's counterintuitive. You don't expect to be calling someone who really truly is nurturing and empathic arrogant or cold. But the withdrawal is, in fact, a direct result of maturity, self examination, and self preservation. We need to be alone because the rest of you all can wear us the bleep out when we get tired. The fourth point I would like to make is that we get tired of being manipulated. Maturity and self um, in an empath is going to look like manipulation fatigue. We get tired of being told things like this. I actually heard about this. Somebody in Texas, this happened to somebody in Texas years ago. Someone um, said uh, it was a battered woman who'd lived for, I think, about 10 years with an abusive husband. And he shrieked at her, "If only you were more Christ-like, you wouldn't bleed when I hit you." That's what he said to her. And she just backed away from him and started laughing. She said, "Look, do you realize how insane that sounded? Christ died. Christ was murdered. He not only bled when they hit him, he died. So don't compare me to Christ." And she went on, with that attack. But I personally had pretty much the same thing happen to me about 4 years ago when someone stole my identity and was trying to get a car loan in my name. And he even tried to buy the house he lived in my name. And I started getting all these texts and emails about these loan applications that I didn't fill out. But since the address of the house he was trying to buy was on there, I knew who had done it. And I called him on it. And I said, "Look, what on earth are you doing? You're an able-bodied, youngish man who can work and work hard and uh, make your own money. Don't try to steal from me." It was absurd. And he actually said that he and his sister had done it, and that if I were, that they thought that I was Christ in a skirt, and they didn't. I'm not joking. I can't. I'm a creative person, but I couldn't make this crap up. He actually said that they didn't have any spiritual or religious training as they were them, and I read from all the world's religions and then the secular philosophies when I was still in elementary school. And so um, he actually said, "If you were more Christ-like, you'd forgive us. So if you're not going to be Christ-like, like you want to be, then we're going to keep stealing from you. We're going to keep applying for loans in your name." Because I wasn't Christ-like enough. He was going to continue to be a criminal. I had to point out, you obviously didn't have any religious or spiritual training. And I think what you need to do is actually decide to be more Christ like yourself and stop stealing from people who are older than you are, have certain disabilities and challenges that you have not yet faced or may never face. So, if only you were more Christ like, you wouldn't be trying to steal from me, now would you? He was a true full blown narcissist, and I'm not sure if anything I ever said to that man got through. He was what I call the bottom five. Out of the thousands of people I've ever known, I think of like the five most completely self-interested, completely selfish people. And this person who told me I wasn't Christ-like enough, so he was going to keep trying to get loans in my name, um, was one of what I call the bottom five. He's one of the most profoundly selfish people I've ever encountered. And like I said, we get tired of this. We get tired of being told that we're not bleeding heart liberals enough, that we're already empathic, we already care, we already nurture you more than the vast majority of people will. We get really tired of, of being prey to your predators. We're not prey. We're beautiful. We care. We love deeply. We love large. So people need to stop trying to take advantage of empaths and get more. There's some old song by Creedence Clearwater Revival that said, when we ask, it's about soldiers, when we ask how much we should be giving, the answer from the commander is always more. No, enough already. Take the beauty and the nurturance that you might give from an empathic, loving person for what it is, a gift. But don't try to manipulate us into giving more, because at some point our resources do run out, and we do fatigue. We fatigue. fairly easily when we're in such manipulative types of contexts. There's something that is shocking, but I'm going to say it anyway. Number five, there's such a world as this great averaging place, and that the common man is good, and blah blah blah. Not necessarily. There are there are a lot of contexts, a lot of indices that you could plot on a graph in this world in which the what is normal is not what is healthy. What let's say look at the normal diet in America. Um, Coca-Cola and potato chips and French fries and fast food, and you know that's not healthy. It's normal, but it's not healthy. So there are a lot of situations like competitiveness, jealousy. These may be normal emotions, but they're not particularly healthy ones. So when someone has been an empath all their life, and when they have done a lot of self examination and have self realization, wisdom, what Abraham Maslow called self actualization, they may seem superior. And hopefully, or, no, necessarily that comes with humility. They're not self-aggrandizing. They're not going around putting themselves over. And they're never going to be narcissistic. An empath and a narcissist are on very different ends of a continuum of social behavior and in intrapersonal, within the personal behavior. The thinking of an empath is not the thinking of a narcissist and never will be. Narcissists lack empathy. That's the single most important criteria when you're trying to identify a narcissist. They really don't care about people. And empaths, to a fault, can care too much about others and not enough, exhibit not enough self nurturance and social withdrawal so that they can function and aren't depleted. Empaths get depleted easily because we love big and we love large. So when you see someone with wisdom and with nurturance and compassion, you see that that comes with humility and an egalitarian, democratic uh, view toward others. Don't be jealous. You've seen real superiority, and that was hard won. That wasn't easy. That didn't come in a day. That came from a lifetime of self examination and work. Being a wise person is not like falling off a log. You have to work at wisdom. It is a daily, lifelong endeavor. So instead of being jealous, try to emulate them, try to follow that example. Don't see the kind of superiority that a self-actualized empathic person really does have as something that separates. See that as something you can admire and try to emulate. A good example that I tend to use is, let's say Vanessa Williams is a great tennis player, or Mark Spitz was a great athlete. If that's known, does everybody get jealous if they say, yeah, I play tennis really, really well, or yep, I'm a really good swimmer? No. For someone to know that they have a form of superiority in some dimension is not the same as narcissism. It's not the same as self aggrandizing behavior. It is simply reporting a statistical phenomenon. And if someone said, my IQ is one of the highest in the world, and my IQ scores fall at the 99.999 percentile, that's not being narcissistic, that's reporting a statistic. And if that comes with love and it comes with a personality, if someone scored real high on tests of IQ, but use that, use their smarts to achieve wisdom, use their intellect to read good books and to become an enlightened, loving person. Don't mistake simply saying that you did well on certain tests as narcissism. It has nothing to do with narcissism. It's any more than being a good tennis player or a good swimmer does. Narcissism is one of the most dangerous things anyone can be. They want to control you. They don't want you to leave. When you try to leave a narcissist, they will hurt you, sometimes physically, just for trying to get away from them because they want and need so much that control over you. Those of us who are empathic, are a lot better at letting people leave. We often want people to leave. We need to get away, and we want silence and freedom and quiet and the ability to concentrate. The sixth point I would make is one about boundaries. And here again, a lot of these things I'm saying about about empaths may seem counterintuitive. That you'd think, oh, an empath is going to be my best friend, and they're always going to be there for me, and they're going to be, um, always loving and always kind. No, that's not our job. We do have self-preservation at stake, and we do have to achieve boundaries. I was only 9 years old when someone started schooling me about this. He was a researcher from Stanford who had studied empathy and its relationship with Kirlian photography and high EMF fields. But I had my hand photographed several times by a researcher from Stanford who had just been working with Olga Warhol, who is known as a great healer, and she was a friend of Edgar Cayce's and a cohort and colleague of his. And so he said to a 9-year-old kid, wow, your Kirlian photograph shows that you have the strongest electromagnetic field that I've ever seen. It looks like you have the whole sun behind your hand. And I was bouncing off the wall, and I thought, wow, that's cool, some sort of EMF field and the sun behind my hand. I thought that's all good. And he said, whoa, wait a minute. And he got very sad and somber, and he started telling me that uh, high EMF fields tend to be correlated with high empathy and nurturance and loving others and compassion. And he said, I've talked to people who know you, and I already know that all these qualities are yours. And he said, Nancy, people are going to try to use you for everything you're worth because these qualities are seen by predatory people as what's going to make you good prey. And they will take and take and take from you until you have nothing left to give. So start now. You're only a 9-year-old kid, but start now realizing that empathy is a mixed blessing. It's a blessing, all right, and people will love you and people will need you, and you'll be able to do a lot of good in the world with this incredible quality called high empathy. But realize that there are some sociopaths who will see that it would make you easy prey, and they will take until there's nothing left to give. And so I took him seriously because he just got so somber about the whole thing, and his advice seemed to come almost with tears in his eyes. So think on these things. I hope that some of the things that I have said today are informative and edifying, possibly even entertaining, and go back to that dream I had. Realize that if any one of us could feel all the emotion in the world, wouldn't it be wonderful to be able to do that if you lived on a world in which it wasn't mostly pain? Wouldn't it be wonderful? And can you commit yourself to start behaving in such a fashion that we live on a world in which there's significantly less pain? Children, for the disadvantaged, the disabled, the elderly, and for animals, and for the planet hereupon. Start behaving in such a way that we all live on a planet in which the emotions generated are not primarily pain. This is Nancy Love, live for the Planet Peace Project. More later.